Professor Brahma Chellaney, a very well-respected strategic affairs analyst, joins me on this special broadcast. Professor Chellaney, how would you view these beautiful images and the hard-nosed diplomacy that's going on behind the scenes to at least reach phase one of that bilateral trade agreement by fall? How would you describe the trajectory of the India-US relationship?
It has been quite transformative since October. In October, the relationship between the two countries was under increasing strain. The Joe Biden administration was playing the Khalistan card against India, the human rights card against India, and also using indictments to bring the Modi government under pressure. And then in a few months, we have seen how this relationship has fundamentally transformed in a positive direction. In fact, Vance's visit signals a new chapter in the relationship. It's clear that the Biden-era drift is being reversed. The Trump administration has cast Vance's India trip as a key diplomatic mission aimed at strengthening strategic and economic ties with India. So there's a clear shift in the US attitude toward India with the change of administration. And if Trump realizes his goal of ending the war in Ukraine, his administration will shift America's strategic focus from Europe to the Indo-Pacific, making the relationship with India even more critical for the success of the Indo-Pacific strategy. Yes.
That's a very, very important point that you're making, and all indications do appear to be that shift from the Russia-Ukraine conflict to the situation in the Indo-Pacific. And that's the question I was coming to, sir, that Vice President is here, the US Vice President is here right now. The US President is expected in India later this year for the Quad Summit that India hosts this year. Last year was, of course, our turn, but because President Biden wanted to host it, so India gets our turn this year. How does that relationship move forward? And would that bilateral trade agreement or phase one of that bilateral trade agreement, in your appreciation, be concluded in the next 90 days or by fall and before President Trump's visit to India?
Well, let's look at the larger context. In recent months alone, since Trump returned to the White House, there have been a series of bilateral visits and engagements. We had Modi visiting the White House in the second week of February. We had the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, coming to New Delhi. And now Vance's visit. This will be followed by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's visit to India by June, most likely. And then Trump himself coming in the fall for the Quad Summit, as you mentioned. So clearly, there is this renewed vigor in the relationship. And of course, the personal rapport between Trump and Modi has proven durable. And that personal rapport has been instrumental in restoring the relationship, in reviving the relationship from, the relationship had frayed very clearly under Biden. And now that relationship has been restored. But of course, there are several differences that remain. Trade remains a flashpoint. This does not mean that tensions remain. That in fact, the tensions that flared under Biden are beginning to ease. But on trade, difficult negotiations are still ahead. And I think that one has to keep in mind that Trump's America First agenda often collides with Modi's Make in India initiative. And in a way, Modi, reminded Trump at the White House about their parallel but divergent paths when he borrowed from Trump's own slogan by vowing to make India great again. So we've had this, the tensions have eased, but there are certain issues that need to be ironed out. Also, US policies toward India's neighborhood, they have to become a bit more aligned with India's interests. Right now,
that's the point. That's the
Right
point I
now,
want you to weigh in on, when it comes to Pakistan state-sponsored radical Islamist terror, rise of radicalism in Bangladesh, what the Biden administration was doing in terms of that regime change operation. So beyond the optics, how does it show its India, either in favor of India, if not openly and directly India first, when it comes to neighborhood and a very difficult neighborhood? I'll come to China in just a moment, but Pakistan and Bangladesh first, sir.
see, if the US and India are to coordinate effectively in the Indo-Pacific to help counter China's aggressive expansionism, they must reconcile their policies towards India's neighborhood. They can't be working at cross purposes, or the US shouldn't be working in a way that is antithetical to India's core interests in India's own neighborhood. So we have seen how under Biden, the US was aiding military-backed regimes in Pakistan and Bangladesh while trying to overthrow Myanmar's military regime. And all these policies that we had under Biden contributed to regional instability and also to instability in India's border areas. For example, Manipur ethnic conflict in part has been fueled by the inflow of arms and militants from Myanmar. And some of these arms that have flowed to Northeast India are actually Western weapons that have been supplied to the rebels in Myanmar. So it's very important for the US and India to work in a way that reconciles their policies towards India's neighborhood so that they can be effective partners in the larger Indo-Pacific region. And I think.
And how do you view China's response, Professor Chellaney? The way China issued a statement, you heard their Commerce Ministry when it said that there would be effective countermeasures should somebody have a deal with the United States of America that adversely impacts Chinese interests. Is that aimed at India? Is that aimed at Europe? Or is that a general signal that Beijing is sending out?
Gaurav, China is on the back foot because it doesn't have the same leverage in the trade war as the US. After all, China exports 5 times more goods to the US than what it imports. So obviously, it has a weaker hand compared to the US. And therefore, its own response to Trump's tariffs have been rather cautious and, very, they have been very careful not to do things that would actually cause further harm to the Chinese economy. And they have made it clear that they will not go beyond the 125% tariffs that they have imposed, even if Trump were to further hike the tariffs against China. That's because of China's limited leverage with the US. And I think that this rhetoric from China about wanting other countries not to gang up with the US, this rhetoric, of course, shows, in fact, it highlights Beijing's limitations. The fact that today, at a time when the Chinese economy is faltering, China is facing a deepening demographic crisis. It has been hit by unparalleled tariffs by the US. And this is going to have a significant impact on China's growth trajectory in the years to come. In fact, what Trump is doing is he's actually being very strategic. The tariffs are only one element in a bigger strategy of the Trump administration. He has also placed restrictions on chip exports to China so as to slow its advance in artificial intelligence and also to choke its military modernization. So there's a clear effort on the part of Trump to make China the focus of US policies and to contain China in different ways, technologically, economically, politically, diplomatically, which is why India becomes even more important for the Trump administration foreign policy.
That's the point I was coming to, that if India is so important and India's importance will only increase, do we expect a more conciliatory approach in that bilateral trade agreement negotiations, or will the US also be a very tough negotiator? Because in areas like agriculture and dairy, there are certain red lines that India would also be, bringing across and trying to get that message across. Or that negotiation we should leave to the negotiators and wait for the final outcome.
I think it's apparent that the Trump administration needs India more than India needs the US in a way, because the whole Indo-Pacific strategy of the Trump administration, in a way, relies on India being co-opted in that strategy. And it's partly because of this that the Trump administration is doing a course correction on India policy. And there are conscious efforts on both in New Delhi and in Washington to reestablish mutual respect and trust. So India has to negotiate in a manner to uphold its vital economic interests. It shouldn't be giving concessions the way, for example, before Modi went to the White House, India already announced a reduction in
tariffs
some
on
tariffs. That signaled weakness on India's part. And also, for example, now Reuters is reporting in recent days that India has already agreed to slash tariffs on over half of imports from America, worth $23 billion. That's about more than half of the total trade, more than half of the total trade surplus that India enjoys. And I think that India has to negotiate in a manner that it does not harm its economic interest, because its economy is very vulnerable at the moment. As we all know that India's economic growth has slowed, and the agricultural sector is politically very, very sensitive sector, because
it indeed is, and we'll track that story very closely. Professor Chellaney, for joining me here on India Today, many thanks.